Did you know that a Hollywood actor and a famous makeup artist had a relationship that seemed perfect in front of the cameras, but behind closed doors was quite the opposite? And the climax of this relationship came one morning when he broke into her house to attack her and ended up with an exemplary sentence. If you want to know everything that happened, stay with me until the end of the video. Hello everyone, how are you? My name is Lesma. I hope you are doing very well. As always, I am very happy to be here with you for another day. Very grateful that you are watching me wherever you are. Today we have a case that happened in the United States, that of Nick Pascual. Join me to see all the details. Nicholas Pascual, whom we will refer to as Nick from now on, was born on April 12, 1990 in the United States, and from a very young age he knew he wanted to be an actor. So, from his adolescence, he began to live like many actors in Hollywood, with small roles, different auditions, and the occasional independent project. But during his first years, he didn't manage to get a big break, and his first steps in entertainment were quite modest. He worked at some events at Universal Studios in Los Angeles, and also started getting small roles on television. But he never got a big leading role. Mind you, he stayed active in some independent productions and even had several supporting roles in major films. So he spent years jumping between auditions, castings, and small projects, trying to make a name for himself. Those who knew him publicly describe him as a rather reserved man. And unlike other actors, he didn't build a strong image on social media. Nor did he seem interested in becoming a celebrity as such. He didn't give too many interviews, didn't show much of his private life, and always kept a relatively low profile. Even so, at a certain point, his career seemed to get closer to something bigger. It all happened when Nick got a small part in the popular series How I Met Your Mother, one of the most successful shows on American television at the time. The role was brief, but for an actor of his profile, appearing in such a well-known production for several episodes felt like a sign that he was finally moving forward. However, despite being in this project, it seemed that his career wasn't quite taking off, and he continued to move more in the independent scene, where he wasn't just an actor. Over time, he began producing small shows. In addition, he also appeared in various podcasts, stand-up, and comedy shows. This seemed to be something Nick liked quite a bit, and he even went on to produce different episodes of what he loved so much, comedy. In the end, it seemed he wouldn't be a celebrity, but he could make a living in entertainment doing what he liked and keeping that low profile he had cared so much about. It wasn't until 2022 that Rebel Moon came along, an ambitious science fiction film where Nick had another small part. Mind you, this film mobilized hundreds of people, including actors, technical assistants, makeup artists, and special effects specialists. And it was in that environment that he met a woman named Ali Shahorn. That meeting, although neither of them could have known it then, would mark the beginning of the dark part of this story. It is known about Ali that she studied art and discovered over time that what she was really passionate about was not the traditional art circuit, but the intense and chaotic pace of film sets. That feeling of being behind the scenes, working against the clock, and with a whole production coming to life around her, seemed to be what interested her most. At that moment, she decided to specialize in film makeup and entered a professional school in Los Angeles focused on special effects for cinema. From there, far from focusing on typical glamorous makeup, she began to work in more complex and demanding areas, like fake wounds, silicone prosthetics, creatures, and aging effects. It was a very technical job, because being a special effects makeup artist required almost surgical precision from her. She spent hours molding prosthetics, painting tiny veins on silicone, mixing chemicals, and working with complex adhesives, in addition to enduring long workdays under constant pressure. But all this work paid off because for many, Allie was a true film artisan. She became a highly respected professional in this environment, and over time she began working on major film productions. Her talent was even recognized within the horror and independent film circuits, where she received various awards. And although she wasn't famous to the general public, within Hollywood, her name was becoming more and more respected. Allie was completely integrated into this community and had built a highly valued reputation. She was even already part of the Hollywood Professional Makeup Artists and Hairstylists Guild. Those who worked with her described her as a warm, resilient, and extremely hardworking person. She really liked social media, where she showed part of her work. For Allie, Hollywood was not just a fantasy, but a craft to which she had dedicated years of perfectionism. In short, although their paths were very different, their personalities were more compatible. And over time, Nick and Allie, after meeting on this film, began a romantic relationship. Over time, the relationship became public, and the couple could be seen posing on different red carpets and at various events. From the outside, it seemed like an idyllic relationship between two people in Hollywood. While they weren't extremely famous and weren't complete celebrities, it seemed they were doing very well in every area they worked in, and they were making a name and a space for themselves in that difficult Hollywood scene. Everyone who saw them very happy, and they presented themselves as almost the perfect couple. It seemed their lives couldn't get any better. But behind closed doors, things were very different, and the couple, after a few months of relationship, began to experience various problems, to the point where they ended up separating. When they decided to end their relationship, they were living together, so Allie decided to move in with a friend to get completely away from Nick. This friend was named Christine, and had a house in a quiet residential neighborhood in North Los Angeles. This brings us to May 23, 2024. It was around 4:30 in the morning when Allie was still sleeping in the house, and suddenly she woke up when she discovered that someone had broken into her room. As far as we know, Nick lunged at her and began to attack her. Somehow, Allie managed to run and locked herself in the bathroom. She thought there was another lock on that door. However, it wasn't enough. Minutes later, Christine woke up in the middle of the chaos, and what she found when she left her room was a scene that would be very hard to forget.
I found her. That wasn't a clean sight.
Allie was seriously injured. Even so, she was able to explain to her that it had all been Nick's doing, who had already fled the scene. Immediately, the woman contacted emergency services saying her housemate was injured. She also kept her hand on Allie's throat to stop the loss of fluids while they waited for the paramedics to arrive. And that quick action was decisive in this case. And when the paramedics arrived, they were met with a completely horrific scene. There was blood everywhere, but Allie was still alive. In addition to that, since she was able to identify Nick, the person who had attacked her, a major police chase began in the area around the house. Little time had passed between the call to the emergency number and the arrival of the authorities, so they thought Nick might still be in the vicinity. But one way or another, the man managed to escape at that moment, and while the police were trying to arrest him, Allie was taken to the hospital. At first, it was said that her situation was completely critical and she might not survive. But as the minutes went by, thanks to what her friend had done, she was able to start improving. So while Allie was trying to survive and the police were trying to find out where Nick was, the authorities began working against the clock to reconstruct what had happened in the house. They realized that a confrontation had taken place in Allie's room, so they concluded that after breaking into the home, Nick had attacked the woman in bed with a sharp weapon.
I was asleep in bed and he stabbed me over and over and over again with a knife.
Due to her injuries, she had tried to cover her face and neck with her hands. And once she managed to flee to the bathroom, Investigators determined that Nick beat on the door to make several holes and managed to get in that way.
Tried to protect my face and my neck and rolled off the bed and ran into the bathroom.
Thus, once he opened the bathroom, Nick attacked her again in a brutal and uncontrolled manner. Once Allie was recovering in the hospital, hours went by, and the press began to take notice of the case, especially because of the small roles Nick had had in various Hollywood productions. And so, little by little, people began to talk about an actor who almost took his ex-girlfriend's life. In addition to this, certain incidents that had occurred before this attack also began to come to light, suggesting that the couple was not as happy as they appeared in front of the cameras. And Allie had even put a restraining order against Nick. According to the woman, he was too violent, he was controlling, he wanted to know where she was, and besides that, he got angry very quickly over small things, which is why, after separating, she went to report him. She requested this restraining order and also asked for police protection. According to court documents, there was also an alarming pattern of abuse, as he had grabbed Allie by the neck on several occasions, abused her, kicked down doors inside the house, and hit her with a belt. It was also said that Nick had a history of problematic alcohol consumption. And although there was this report and this restraining order, the situation continued to escalate, because 5 days before the attack I just described, Nick had been arrested for a felony related to domestic violence and was then taken to a local jail. What is hard to understand is that just a few hours later, he was released after posting a $50,000 bail. And this is what leads us to one of the most disturbing aspects of this story, which is the fact that having a restraining order, having a history of alcohol abuse, and also knowing that he was a violent man, why did the judge let Nick go on bail? He was really someone who needed to be behind bars until this situation could be cleared up. If you think about it, if he had been in jail at that time, he wouldn't have attacked Allie, who, if it weren't for her friend, for example, if she had lived alone in that house, would have actually been murdered that same night, and that was something that many people criticized. In the end, Nick had enough money to pay the bail, and this allowed him to get out of jail. So a week after the events, Nick was captured at a Texas border crossing. According to authorities, he was trying to cross into Mexico to escape justice. Later, he was extradited to Los Angeles, and the news of his arrest fueled interest in the case. But the true extent of the aftermath of Allie's attack also began to be known. Although she survived, she had to undergo multiple reconstructive surgeries. There were a total of 14 operations. She had deep cuts on her face, partially lost her vision, and also had permanent nerve damage in her hands. This was very hard for her because those were her tools of the trade, her hands. And so many doctors told her at that time that she wouldn't be able to do her job again. But as the months went by, Allie slowly began to recover and also to seek justice. And it wasn't until March 2025 that Nick was charged with first-degree murder, residential burglary, and forcible rape. He pleaded not guilty to all charges, which made the case move slowly through the courts. In addition to that, a detail emerged around that time that caught people's attention. Nick, before committing the attack against Allie and before being arrested, had participated or was still participating in productions and projects. And because of this, he continued to appear in the credits of different platforms and also in the Hollywood independent scene. In some cases, he was listed as a producer. In others, he was associated with previously recorded content. In others, he had also acted. And it seemed that within the circle, he still maintained quite a few close ties, even after everything that had been said about the case. For many people, he should have been removed from these productions. Meanwhile, for Allie, each legal step forward was accompanied by months of both physical and emotional recovery. It was at that time that a friend organized a campaign to cover her medical expenses, and the response was immediate. People connected to the film industry, friends, neighbors, and complete strangers donated money and shared her story. and in a short time she managed to raise an amount of money that helped her immensely to recover day by day. But the most shocking part of the story would come later, and despite the fact that many doctors told Ali at one point that she would never work again, little by little, with the help of many people, she managed to have a very good recovery and decided to go back to work, and she was actually able to do it very well. Obviously, the first days were very hard for her, but as time went on, she was able to work alongside her colleagues, go back to being a makeup artist in Hollywood, and do small projects. She also had to readapt her techniques, hold tools with precision again, and endure a lot of physical pain. But for her, it was about reclaiming a part of herself. So, after 2 years, in the spring of 2026, Nick began to face justice. The scenes inside the trial were extremely harsh, because Ali, far from staying away from the trial or choosing to submit a written statement, faced Nick face to face. The press was closely following the case, as I told you before, with him being connected to Hollywood, or well, with both of them being connected to Hollywood. Everyone wanted to know what was happening and who would get the biggest headline. Faced Nick, the press was closely following the case. As I told you before, with him being connected to Hollywood, or well, with both of them being connected to Hollywood, everyone wanted to know what was happening and who would get the biggest headline. Ali spoke at the trial not only about the night of the attack, but also about all the previous episodes of violence she had experienced with Nick. And in addition to that, she showed what her hands looked like and various scars and wounds she had on her body. Obviously, all of this shocked the people present in the courtroom. It made the whole trial even more shocking than it already was. And obviously, she also did it to make her story known and create more of an impact. Finally, in May 2026, Nick was found guilty of all charges against him, and the following month in June came the time for the final sentencing. During that hearing, Nick spoke and claimed that what happened that morning was a burden he had to carry for the rest of his life. He also said he felt grateful that Ali survived the attack and could still share her talent with the world. Finally, he was sentenced to a minimum of 32 years and a maximum of life in prison. That is, he will have to spend a minimum of 32 years in prison before he can start asking for parole, but he might never get it. Ali was very grateful outside the courtroom for this sentence, as it set a precedent. Nick hadn't taken her life, but in the end, he is a danger to society. He is an impulsive person, with alcohol problems, with substance problems, who also becomes very violent and shouldn't be on the streets. In the end, the case ended reasonably well. Ali can keep working, and Nick will surely never set foot on the streets again, because with his record, it's not very likely that any judge will give him the opportunity for parole. And well guys, that's it for today's video. A very sad, very shocking case, but also a case where we have a survivor, a person who managed to overcome terrible situations and went back to her work, which is what she loves most. And in the end, an exemplary sentence for a person who, as I repeat, should no longer be among us because he is a danger to society. Tell me what you think. If you found this video informative, remember to leave a like. Remember to subscribe if you haven't already. I update 3 or 4 times a week, and if you are subscribed, you will get a notification every time I upload a video. Now, see you in another case. Bye.